the most important thing to remember when you're creating a tone is, first off, having a good working knowledge with whatever you're using, whether it's an Axe Effects or an amp. Really getting familiar with what it's capable of by just experimenting, by plugging your guitar in and really like trying all different combinations that might sound good to you. The thing that I usually try to think about when I'm building a tone is less is more. So what I mean by that is try not to overcomplicate it with lots of EQs and stomp boxes and like just extra stuff. Like really try to minimize the amount of stuff going into your signal, and I guarantee you'll be happier in the long run because it'll be easier to get that tone and it also fit well in the mix. That's the most important part about a guitar and playing in a band and even recording, is that you have a certain frequency range of where that guitar sits. And if you're playing guitar just by yourself, you know, there are a lot more tones that might sound good to your ear and that you like, that you enjoy playing with. However, when you move to recording or playing live, it might not sit well with the other instruments. Because if you imagine you only have a certain amount of space and your guitar takes up this certain amount of space, you want to make sure it takes up just that space, so the drums, the bass, the vocals all have their space too. And if you're not careful with creating the guitar tone, you're going to step on those other spaces. So just and I should say that the guitar is a mid-range instrument. You're going to want to really focus on maximizing your mid output, and because that's where it sits the best. Yeah. Well, I think with the second album, we wanted to experiment a little bit more. With the first album, we also did it at home, and I think we were ready to try out a new sound. I think one of our goals as a band is to not do the same thing twice. So we try to experiment, and we knew that going into the studio, we'd be able to get guitar tones that were much different, because you can't plug in an amp and cab in an apartment building. It'll really make the neighbors angry. So we went to the studio to do that, and we had a friend who owns a great studio, and he let us record there at a reduced rate, and we were able to really spend time experimenting. So that's kind of why we went with the studio in the first place. As far as Periphery 3 goes, I think we kind of distilled down what it is we do as a band and what how we record and how we write, and I guess like we just kind of reached a new point where it was comfortable to experiment at Misha's house. We recorded it at Misha's house, so we all flew in and we put sleeping bags on the floor, and we basically just lived at his place for a month and a half and wrote and recorded Periphery 3. So we've never really done anything like that before. We call it a retreat style, or like a holiday style, where we kind of just, you know, we take a certain amount of time and that's all we do. And that's how Periphery 3 came about. We just pretty much worked from a certain time to a certain time every day, and it was just a very strict schedule, but I think it gave us the best product, because we treated it like a job. You know, like you'd go in at 11 o'clock and we'd finish up at 7 o'clock, and we'd break for lunch and all that stuff. But because we had that schedule, and because we were all living in the same spot, it just made it easier to share ideas and to record and to write. It's going to be a very subtle difference, but as you get more comfortable with specific types of woods in guitars, you'll notice that they have these very specific tonalities or timbres. I liked mahogany because it was dark, and I thought that a lot of the sound coming out live is going to be a lot of high-end and mid-range, and I kind of wanted to counterbalance that with a much more darker, richer wood. As far as moving to a lighter wood like the bass wood on the 8-string, I just wanted to try a lighter guitar, because these guitars are very heavy, and if you play an hour-long set, it's gonna, you know, I'd rather play with a much lighter guitar. I still love these guitars, and I'm gonna play with them, you know, forever, but I just kind of want to experiment with the lighter woods. I do notice that that guitar is much brighter sounding, so that's kind of the trade-off. You know, you get a lighter guitar, but the tonality is going to change. You guys probably noticed that I don't have a pedal board, and that I mentioned that I use the computer to change the sounds on my Axe effects. I guess I want to show you exactly what that means and what you can use it for if you do connect your audio interface to your Axe effects. So with my main rhythm patch, I have 3 different settings, and I have just a regular rhythm patch, I have a mid-tight patch, and I have a very tight patch. So here's the difference between those 3. So that's my regular rhythm patch. Then I have a mid-tight patch, so that you can hear the gate choking up on it. And I use it for things like very notey things like this. So that way I can get all those notes really, really tight, but also have a little bit of sustain to them as well, because you know, certain things like I want to ring out, but not ring out indefinitely. And then for the last patch, or it's a very tight patch, so it's. That way I can do that very staccato muting style of playing, and it really helps with that. And what I'm doing is I'm sending MIDI messages that I program in Cubase. So this little mark right here is sending a MIDI message to change the scenes. So the Axe Fix has several different scenes per patch, and that way you don't have to load a whole nother patch to just turn on the noise gate or make it tighter or whatever. So that way I can not have to worry about stepping on it and just focus completely on playing. It makes it much easier to play this difficult style of music using that. Another thing that is really cool is that you can switch on an octave patch too. And I don't know how many of you guys are in bands? Raise your hand. And yeah, are you guys guitar players? Yeah. Okay, cool. So depending on how many guitar players you have in your band, this is a really cool way to fatten up the rhythm sound. And you turn an octave patch on one of the guitars while the other guitarist is playing on a regular patch, but you get this very. Live, it sounds huge, and you can even do it when you're recording. You know, just make sure that it's underneath the rhythm track, but it makes it much more full and big sounding. And I'm turning that on for certain riffs to create that effect. And then I just want to show you some of my other patches that I switched to. This is kind of what the Axe Fix is capable of. that's a lead patch, and I'm just changing all those using the computer. So you guys might consider incorporating that into your band. That way you just focus on playing. There's no worry, and you can take less gear too.